One major fact about psychedelics that most people don't have a clue about when they're picking one for mental health. Hey everybody, I'm Leah Benson, and I'm a body-based psychotherapist, psychedelic guide, and coach in Tampa Bay. And I'm about to tell you 3 things to consider if you're looking into psychedelics for mental health. Number 1, the most common psychedelics for mental health. Number 2, some of the pros and cons of each. And number 3, an aspect of psychedelics that most people don't even have a clue about when they're picking one. All right, number 1, the most common psychedelics being used for mental health. First, there are the classic psychedelics, which are psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, DMT, and 5-MeO-DMT, which some people call the toad. Then there's the non-traditional psychedelics of ketamine and MDMA, cannabis, and ibogaine, among others. The reason these are all called psychedelics is because psychedelic means mind-revealing. And when you take these different plants or fungi or chemicals, the contents of your mind come into your awareness in different ways than you're used to seeing them or knowing about them. And they create different physical and physiological experiences because they hit different targets in your brain. And it gets way more complicated than that, but this is an overview, so we'll leave it at that. The reality is that there are plenty of other mind-altering medicines out there that people are taking for all sorts of reasons. But when it comes to psychedelics for mental health, these are the most common ones in use right now. And you'll notice that I didn't mention ayahuasca, which has gained massive popularity recently, but that's just because ayahuasca is simply a way to prepare DMT. It's not some other kind of psychedelic. The second thing you want to consider as you think about psychedelics for mental health is some of the major pros and cons of all these different substances. The most overarching pro for psychedelics is that done with intention and a systematic program of therapy and integration, every one of these psychedelics can facilitate and catalyze lasting, positive mental health changes. The reasons are many and complicated, but in a nutshell, that's it. The first and probably the biggest con for most people is the legal status of psychedelics. Right now, there's only one psychedelic that is completely legal in the United States, and that one is ketamine. The others are all either completely illegal, and some are decriminalized in some places, and some are becoming legal in 1 or 2 places under some circumstances. But on the whole, you're dealing with a massive gray area around the use of most psychedelics. Because even if a state decriminalizes one or creates a legal structure for its use, the federal government hasn't yet. So you're taking legal risks if you delve into the scene. Another con for a lot of people is that purity of the substance is not known for most of these substances either. Since they're illegal, it's hard to know your source, and there's no regulation to make sure the product is any good. Another con is that it can be hard to determine dosage for some of these medicines. Take the ayahuasca delivery method of DMT, for example. It's a tea, so even though it's possible to estimate doses to a certain degree, it's very hard to standardize. Everyone brews their tea differently, and every batch comes out a little different, depending on a lot of different factors, including the plants the brewer uses for the huasca, which is the part of the tea that keeps your body from metabolizing the DMT immediately, so you get no effects at all. And it's usually the different plants used for the huasca part of the tea that makes for the digestive discomfort you might have heard about that people get when they drink ayahuasca. Some batches will be more nauseating than others, but you don't know which, and you don't know why. Another downside of most psychedelics is that it can take your body anywhere from 4 to 12 hours to metabolize most of them, and up to 24 to 48 hours to metabolize ibogaine. So you're in for a very long ride. And the ones that don't take that long to metabolize, including vaporized DMT or 5-MeO DMT, they are not on track to be legal anytime soon. Now, does that mean you shouldn't do what you can to find ways to take advantage of the huge mental health benefits of these substances for trauma, anxiety, depression, and substance abuse? I don't know, because I'm not here to promote the use of illegal substances. That's a decision you're gonna have to make on your own. That said, there are US jurisdictions where certain psychedelics are decriminalized, and certain countries within which certain psychedelics are even legal. But for everyone not interested in being under the influence of a psychedelic for the first time in a foreign country with complete strangers, or mucking around in any legal gray areas, guess what? One of these psychedelics is legal. And there is clarity around sourcing and dosage. And that psychedelic is ketamine. And if you want to know more about it and how it's used for mental health, in language that's down to earth and easy to understand, check out my book, The Beginner's Guide to Ketamine Therapy for Mental Health, at ketaminetherapybook.com. I'm not saying that there are not huge benefits of each of the other psychedelics I mentioned. I'm just calling out the obvious for those of you who are concerned about legal or sourcing gray areas. You deserve to have the help you need without feeling like you have to even consider breaking any laws or subjecting yourself to the control of complete strangers in another country, or even complete strangers in this country who are not regulated in any way. The third thing you want to be aware of when thinking about psychedelics for mental health is the different types of physical experiences you're going to have. Most people don't have a clue that this is even something to consider. Let me break it down for you. At mental health dosing levels, as opposed to typical doses people take to party or be social, the traditional psychedelics, including psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, DMT, and 5-MeO DMT, and really both MDMA and ibogaine, are going to send your energy level sky high, especially MDMA, because it's essentially got the same energetic effect on your nervous system as amphetamine. Think Adderall or Dexedrine. And yes, MDMA is well known as the love drug, so to speak. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be uncomfortable when you take it for mental health reasons. And it gets much more complicated and varied as far as other possible physical experiences you could have. You could laugh, you could cry, you could get nauseated, you could throw up, you could feel ecstatic, you could feel terrified, you could want to scream and run around. You could want to curl up in a ball. You could feel like you're having an exorcism or speaking in tongues, and so forth. Because everyone's metabolism is different, and everyone's temperament is different. And those factors will change the flow of the subjective experience you have, because the thoughts that come up as your mind swirls uncontrollably, and the thoughts you are having about what is happening to you, and your typical reactions to uncertainty and the unknown are nearly as important to how the experience feels as the effects the medicine is actually having on your nervous system as it changes the typical chemistry of your brain. So what that means is that if you are not accustomed to and comfortable with letting go and allowing yourself to express your feelings physically and or vocally as the energy level rises in your body, things can get extremely uncomfortable for you. And they can be that way for hours. Because remember, these psychedelics can take anywhere from 4 to 24 hours to make their way through your metabolism. Now, what I'm telling you is not meant to turn you off from traditional psychedelics. It's simply meant to warn you that perhaps before you get yourself down that rabbit hole and potentially overwhelm yourself and subsequently turn away from and miss out on the value of traditional psychedelics, you spend some time getting accustomed to and comfortable with vocal and physical expression of feelings, which can be accomplished through any number of programs, a few of which are the non-linear movement method, which I know nothing about except that they facilitate learning to spontaneously move your body and emote. My program, the Feel Good Formula, which is a self-paced program of Alexander Lowen's bioenergetic exercises, or the unwinding, as they call it, that is typical of John F. Barnes' myofascial release work. There are many more programs you could choose from, and the one you choose is not important. What is important is building the awareness of and spending the time getting used to allowing the movement and expression of energy through your body and out of your body. Any program will do. Mastering this ability will make taking a mental health dose of a traditional psychedelic not only a memorable experience that you never want to have again, but a valuable arrow in your mental health quiver as you unravel and unlock any non-functional patterns that you're using to get through life. And here's a very important and overlooked problem that I want you to be aware of related to the effectiveness of psychedelics for the long-term picture of your mental health. As I've increased my awareness of the psychedelic community over the last several years, a practice I've seen many psychedelic enthusiasts and even so-called experts practicing is the use of micro, mini, or museum doses of psychedelics that brings a day of ease to the mind or helps diminish symptoms of anxiety or depression temporarily. But this use case does not lead to lasting change in mental or behavioral functioning. It's simply the substitution of psychedelics for pharmaceuticals to manage symptoms. And while I would rather see people be allowed to legally use psychedelics for managing symptoms as much or more than they are currently allowed to use cannabis or anything else to do so, I'm a therapist. So I'm not into promoting anything that is simply symptom management. I'm into unraveling root causes and giving people lasting freedom from the patterns of thought and behavior that undermine their forward movement in life. So to that end, I'm going to circle back around now to the topic of the physical experience that you'll have under the influence of ketamine, the other psychedelic, as opposed to the traditional psychedelics. Ketamine is an altogether different experience. I'll begin by using the words of a very famous chemist in the psychedelics world named Dr. Sasha Shulgin, who wrote 2 volumes on the psychedelics called Pikal and Tikal. And they're basically the Bibles of psychedelic chemistry. Shulgin said of ketamine, "We are strongly prejudiced against psychedelic drugs which cause such mind-body separation, as we are against any drug which causes separation from the feelings and emotions. However, we acknowledge that the ketamine state can be highly instructive for researchers trying to understand the functions of the human mind." Well, guess what, everybody? You are a researcher trying to understand the functions of your mind. And if feelings and emotions are rising up in your body, along with the associated thoughts and memories as you try to understand them, you are likely to be very, very distracted from the calm observation and appraisal of those thoughts and memories, making them much, much harder to live with in a new and different way. And that is what good therapy is about. Giving you perspective on your life and helping you make sense of and live with your past in new ways so you can choose different behaviors going forward rather than continuing with any automatic, non-functional ones that you are currently using. And that is why ketamine is such a valuable mental health tool, especially for people who've never done psychedelics, or for those not comfortable with strong physical sensations in their bodies or not comfortable with the spontaneous expression of those feelings. Long story short, a ketamine experience is a very calm physical experience. It does exactly what Shulgin says it does. It causes a mind-body separation because it's an anesthetic, not a horse tranquilizer, an anesthetic. And the arousal state that is amplified under traditional psychedelics is almost completely dampened during a ketamine experience. You experience nothing but a detached and interested observational perspective while you're under the influence of a mental health dose of ketamine. It is nearly always pleasant physically, except for the rare occasions where nausea occurs at the end of the experience, as it does for some. But that can be mitigated. And while mentally the experience can be challenging, especially for people who use their intellect to manage stress, physically, it's a swing in a hammock. And again, if you want to know more about ketamine therapy for mental health, check out my book, The Beginner's Guide to Ketamine Therapy for Mental Health, at ketaminetherapybook.com. To recap, 3 important things to consider if you're looking into psychedelics for mental health. Number 1, the most common psychedelics for mental health include the following: ketamine, psilocybin mushrooms, LSD, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, MDMA, cannabis, and ibogaine. Number 2, pros and cons. The pro is that with a systematic program of therapy and integration, psychedelics absolutely catalyze lasting positive mental health changes. The cons are primarily about legal access, sourcing, and irregularities of dosing. And number 3, a hidden consideration most people have no clue about regarding different psychedelics. Traditional psychedelics are extremely physically intense at mental health dosing levels. And if you are not prepared for how to deal with that, you need to learn and practice how to express yourself with your body before you take a traditional psychedelic. Ketamine, on the other hand, is physically gentle and makes looking at the contents of your mind much easier. And there you have it, folks. Psychedelics 101. For more information, check out my other videos on psychedelics or visit my website, leahbensontherapy.com. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.